My name's Anne-Marie O'Reilly and I am the National Advocacy Manager with Threshold. Threshold and Alone came together to do this piece of research, Double Deficit, as we are both working with older people who are experiencing homelessness, who've received notices of termination, are living in unsuitable accommodation and in unsustainable tenancies. And in Threshold, we've seen a lot more people over the age of 40 who are renting and experiencing difficulties in their tenancies. And given the low level of social housing and the difficulty in accessing home ownership, it is likely these people will rent for life. And what does this mean for society, given that most social supports are designed on the basis that an older person will own their own home when they reach retirement? How will these services be delivered? Will they be adequate? And so these are some of the questions that Threshold and Alone set out to answer when they commissioned these research. And if renting isn't a suitable tenure for older people, then what are the solutions? What are the policies, the alternatives that we need to be looking at now to ensure older people have a secure and safe home to live?
Hi, I'm Paul Butler from Nexus Research, and together with colleagues Neil Harron and Joe Finnerty, we were responsible for producing the report Double Deficit for Threshold and Alone. In the title itself, we find our two main conclusions. On the one hand, a lived deficit, whereby older people, as they age and as they become more infirm, they're finding that this particular tenure or this sector is not appropriate for them. They explain this in relation to the quality of the accommodation, the insecurity that they're dealing with, the unsuitability of the accommodation in many cases, their agency in terms of being able to move on from that sector. We also find, on the other hand, that there's a strategic deficit. So when we look to data, when we look to policy, when we look to coordination across government departments, there's very clear deficits in relation to the priority that's being allocated in terms of how the various different government departments are addressing these challenges. The three key areas of the research were focusing on policy and desk research, looking at international and Irish literature and policies in this area. We carried out 31 in-depth interviews with ageing and older people living in the sector, and we spoke with 22 experts who are working across both the public and community and voluntary sectors in these areas as well. We find that almost 9 in 10 of the interviewees were living in rental accommodation because of unexpected life circumstances. And we find that almost 5 in 10 attribute this sector to the high levels of stress that they are dealing with on a regular basis in relation to the insecurity and the unsuitability of the accommodation that they're dealing with. One of our interviewees, who was aged 55 and she was recovering from cancer, she put it to us that she didn't expect to be in this position. Housing is at the root of all my concerns over and above my illness. And this type of feedback and these types of insights that we gathered, they're all available to read in the report, but it gets to the root of the fact that housing is so intrinsic and to the types of challenges that many of these older people were dealing with. So when we look at the key conclusions in relation to the strategic deficit, we find that the state, while they're very aware of the rapidly ageing population in relation to a whole range of other policy areas, when it comes to housing need and when it comes to this particular cohort, we find that there's a lack of priority given. We see that there's very limited data available to inform policy making, and we specifically see that there's a lack of cross-government coordination in relation to managing this.
Hi, I'm Sean Moynihan, CEO of Alone. We believe that unfortunately the housing needs of older people in costs could actually dwarf the needs people have in pensions. So what we feel is we need to very clearly define the actual demand for housing for older people and make sure that we build that ring-fencing social housing for older people at a percentage that is proportionate they are to society. We have an ageing population, which is a wonderful thing, and obviously older people now are around 20% of the population. But how do you pay the rent, as we said, when you retire? And the reality is unless there is social housing available, unless there is long-term leases, unless we have different housing choices for older people, same as we want to create for younger people. So what we want to do is get the housing needs for older people high on the agenda, as it is for every other age group.